Hello there, all of you absolutely lovely people. Once again, I am Dax, and I am going to be reviewing for you this book right here, Undines, Lessons from the Realms of the Water Spirits. Now, of course, most of you will already know this, but for those of you who do not, I'll go on ahead and let you know. The word Undine is another word for a water elemental, which is also another word for a mermaid. So mermaids, undines, water elementals, they're all the same thing. And this book by William Mistele is all about them. Now, one of the reasons why I originally picked up this book, I've been drawn to William Mistele's work for quite some time now. As long as I've been alive, I've been fascinated by mermaids, and I've been fascinated by the idea that the human race deserves better than what it's gotten. And so those two things together really made William Mistele's work appeal to me. Now this book here, Undines, is actually the second book of William Mistele's that I purchased, even though it was the first one printed. Now, once again, this is the second of William Mistele's books that I've gotten. The first of his books is called Mermaids, Sylphs, Gnomes, and Salamanders, and it focuses equally on all four types of elementals. This one right here, Undines, it focuses almost exclusively on the water elementals. If I understand this correctly, William Mistele actually wanted to publish the other book first, but the publisher went, well, there's too much in here. We need you to focus on only one of the four elements. Choose one. And William Mistele, being William Mistele with the purpose and goals that he has, he chose the water element. This book is basically divided into three sections, and once again, you can always tell what books I'm constantly reading and referencing based on all these different bookmarks I've got in it. But this book is basically divided up into three sections. The first section focuses on only one Undine, the Undine Istafel, which makes perfect sense because even though she is a water element of the Earth sphere, she's practically cosmic in nature, so it makes sense that he might have one entire section just focusing on her. After that, he goes into a section where he describes a few other Undines, most of them female because the water element is a very feminine element, although he also discusses the merman, Ermat, in there. And then the last section of the book deals with essays and practices, things that you can do in order to contact Undines. So let's break this down a little bit further. Once again, the first section of the book says right there, don't know how well you can see it, but Dialogues with Istafel. In the introduction to this section, he describes Istafel as the most beautiful creature on the planet. He also describes her as a true master of the magnetic fluid and as a woman that the human race simply isn't ready for. She's too powerful in the feminine energy. It kind of freaks people out. He actually compared discussing Istafel to the way a child makes parents kind of uncomfortable whenever they say that they've seen a ghost, and the parents kind of go, well, ghosts aren't real, let's not talk about that. That's kind of how he describes Istafel's presence in this book. Also in the intro section where he starts discussing Istafel, he tells a couple of stories about psychic humans who have met him. He tells the story of poor Donovan, and he also tells the story of Ahmed the Wizard. But then once he gets into the first section where he's actually discussing Istafel, it starts off with him posting several entries from his own magic journal where he discusses his personal experiences with Istafel. It's like he took his journal and said, okay, I'm going to print the stuff on this date and this date and this date. He kind of explores with you what it was like to meet Istafel and work with her in the beginning. After that, he goes on to a section called Istafel's Personality, which I guess that title for the section works. I mean, he does get into her personality, but if I remember correctly, most of the section actually deals with describing her physical, mental, astral, and etheric bodies. And through this description, yeah, he does give you a pretty good idea of what her personality is like. But anyway, that section is entitled Istaful's Personality. But then he has a section labeled Channeling Istaful. And Channeling Istaful is not a how-to section. It's like he wrote out the conversations that he had with Istaful. And it's actually, let's see if I can find that section here. It's written in like a play script format. Yes, as you can see here, there are sections in the book. You know, you've got question and then Istaful's answer. Question, Istaful's answer. And that's what that entire section of this book is. But anyway, that's only the first section of the book when he's discussing Istaful. Once again, it's important to point out he did dedicate one entire section out of 3 sections in the book to this one mermaid queen. What little interaction I've had with Istaful, she's interesting. I'll put it that way. I personally am not far enough into the Franz Barden program where I am good at evoking spirits, but I've dealt with some of these ladies and guys in my mind's eye during some meditations, and fascinating beings. I highly recommend it. I can't wait to see what happens when I'm actually good at this. But anyway, after the section on Istaful, he then moves on and dedicates one chapter apiece in the second section to several other entities, several other Undines. Yeah, like right here, let me move the bookmark out of the way. Right there, he's discussing the very playful and erotic Osapa, the dancer. Yes, she is very erotic, very playful. I guess the best way to describe it would be she's playful in her flirtiness. Which, by the way, to go back to Franz Barden, one of the big dangers of working with the water elementals is we humans who don't actually know what it means to love, we have a tendency to fall in love with them, and we will very happily have our souls leap out of our bodies in order to run away with them. That's the danger of Undines. They never intentionally harm anybody, but we can harm ourselves through our needs and desires to possess them. Then after Osapa, let's see if we can find, there's Amu. Amu, she's very warm and kind and generally described as being like a friend. There's also a really good video on the internet with a couple of people contacting Amu. I'll post that up there at the top. It's pretty interesting. They kind of describe it as if you had a bunch of human world leaders sitting at the negotiation table with a bunch of Undine queens, with a bunch of mermaid queens. Amu is the one that they would have to deal with in regards to what they're doing to the ocean and the environment and things like that. Amu is the one that would be taking them to task for what they've done to the reefs and whatnot. But she's generally described as more of a friend, which is interesting for the very seductive mermaids, for the very seductive Undines. But then we go on to Isafel. This is the mermaid queen that probably has the most profound effect on my own spiritual journey. She's the one who has said that if we want to end all war on Earth, what we need is a minimum of 4 people alive at any given time who truly live their lives without fear. Isafel is the one who has said that if we can achieve that, all war will end. And that's why she has such an effect on my spiritual journey. Ever since I heard that, I have been striving to do my part to be one of those 4. Whether I will accomplish this, who knows? but I figure that if even one person on Earth manages to actually live their life truly without fear, that will at the very least make a huge dent in ending all war on the planet. But once again, that's the Mermaid Queen Isafal, and apparently part of her mission, she has a gift for humanity, if we can prove ourselves worthy of having it. But then it goes on to the merman Ermot, which Ermot, I've got some personal experiences with Ermot. I've described him on a few of my other videos. If I can find it, I'll post one of my videos dealing with Ermot up there right now. He's basically a master of rivers and streams. There is no one water elemental master of rivers and streams, but he is a master of rivers and streams. He works closely with the human race. He has ever since we've come into existence, and he really enjoys creating love between men and women. He seems to be kind of a matchmaker in that regard. But anyway, that's the second part of the book. Now we're moving on to the third part of the book, labeled Essays. And in the section labeled Essays, he's got several chapters here. The first chapter in the third section is Exercises and Review, which is a pretty self-explanatory description, you know. He talks about the different methods that you can use to contact a mermaid. And then the section after that, Images of Water. This is a neat section, and I actually consider it relevant to my current practices. Excuse me real quick. It's a hot day out. I've got to keep drinking. Besides, I'm talking about water elementals. I mean, come on. Are you really going to hold it against me for having a drink when talking about water elementals? Seriously, it's water. Of course, this is grape juice, but still, I'm having a cold drink on a warm day. Get over yourself, people. But what Images of Water talks about is it talks about the different forms of water that you find on the planet. It talks about the water vapor in the clouds. It talks about the water of a waterfall, the water of a river, the water of a subterranean lake. It goes through the list. And of course, the reason why I think this is relevant is because right now I think it is important that I learn how to embody every kind of water that there is. The water of a river, the water of a lake beneath a mountain, or a pool beneath a mountain, my bad. The section afterwards, after he's discussed the different kinds of water, we've got the differences between a real and an imagined mermaid. A real and an imagined Undine, which basically comes down to an imagined Undine is still a figment of your imagination. You have created it, so just like a dream symbol, you're kind of talking to yourself. Whereas with a real Undine can challenge you. It can challenge you to go in directions you normally wouldn't have went. In a lot of ways, he says it's the same as the difference between an imaginary woman and a real woman. A real woman will challenge you. An imaginary woman, you're basically talking to yourself. After that, there is a section in this book on magical versus natural empathy. One of the main things that I remember him discussing in the section of magical versus natural empathy is active listening, actually focusing on the person that you're talking to and paying attention to what they're saying. You're generating that empathy in yourself by making the effort to actually understand them, which is an important lesson that the human race needs to learn. After that is a chapter entitled Well-Being, and then the final chapter of this book is about how to contact an Undine, and it goes through this big description of all the different ways that you can use to come into actual contact with an Undine yourself. But that is the official book. Then at the end you've got Appendix A, Appendix B. Appendix A is about the 5 elements. It's not just about water, and I suspect that all of this came from his notes he was going to use originally for the book that was going to be about all 5 elements. Of course, later he did produce a book about all 5 elements. It's called Mermaids, Sylphs, Gnomes, and Salamanders. I'm going to do a review of that book as well. This section right here seems to be notes and comments that he was going to include in the information about the other elements of this book. And of course he starts off talking about the water element. He goes into the earth element, the air element, the Akashic element, and the fire element. You know, the 5 Western Hermetic elements. And then Appendix B is about sylphs, gnomes, and salamanders, the elementals of the other realms. Sylphs are the air elementals, gnomes are the earth elementals, and the salamanders are the fire elementals. But he doesn't just talk about them in general, he also gives a brief explanation of individuals. For instance, here under sylphs, he talks about the sylph Cargosti. It seems like he did discuss Pyram in here. Yeah, there's Mentiful. Mentiful is a powerful gnome king. Atumo, yeah, there's Pyram the salamander. He goes through and explains individuals within the other elements, although he doesn't go into the detail that he did with the Undines, because this is a book about Undines. But he still mentions the others. And then Appendix C, the Franz Barden training system. But anyway, that is the book, Undines. And once again, you can tell that I go through this book like crazy because I've got all these different bookmarks. If you haven't got it already and you're interested in learning about the elementals, the beings of the elements, check it out. It is a fantastic read. I am Dax. Always remember, you are important. You are loved. Your needs are valid. The same is true for everyone else, and the same is true for my mug of grape juice here. I love you all. I'll see you tomorrow.